What is up, everyone? I'm Rusty, your local laboratory maniac, and this is Landman EDH. Are you looking to spice up your commander games and maybe show off a cool and unique deck in your pod? Well, look no further. This is the channel for you, and this is definitely the video for you. I'll be going over 10 mono black deck builds and how to build them and just the core concepts of these decks. It'll be brief descriptions of the decks, of course. I'm not going to go over every single card, that would take forever. But if you want me to build these and elaborate on them in one of my more in depth videos, comment down below and tell me. And also comment down below to tell me if you have any of these decks. Now let's just go ahead and jump into it. This first one is my favorite. It mixes flavor and function really well, and it will be a deck I will make in paper here shortly. It is based around the idea of an unholy church. In horror movies, you often see the motif of corrupting the righteous, and this deck represents that perfectly. I'll have 13 demons in the deck. It will have a lot of 13 references, as you'll see. It'll have as many priests and religious references that I can put into it while maintaining a human and demon tribal aristocrat theme. Now, our commander is actually Jaren, Corrupted Bishop. He's a member in the Avacyn Church when it was the Avacyn, and then it went to the Sigarda Church. So this is the church that's being corrupted in this deck, the Avacyn Church on Innistrad. Now, Jaren, Corrupted Bishop is a 2 generic, 1 black, legendary creature, human cleric. Whenever Jaren enters the battlefield or another non-token human you control dies, you lose a life and create a 1/1 white human creature token. You can pay 2, target human you control gains lifelink until end of turn. At the beginning of your end step, if you have exactly 13 life, you may pay 4 generic and 2 black, and if you do, transform Jaren, and he's a 2/3. And he transforms into Ormondal the Corruptor, which is a legendary creature demon, flying trample lifelink, and you can sacrifice another creature to draw the card, and it's a 6/6. So we want to get that to that 13 life. So there's many ways you can do that. And also, we're going to be making tokens, sacrificing our non-tokens to make more tokens and lose life, and slowly get down to that 13 life. Quick lore tidbit. Ormondal was released from the Hell Vault along with many other demons on Innistrad. He hid from Avacyn, and when Griselbrand was destroyed by Liliana, he took the place in the Skirtstag cult. Jaren assisted him, wanting to serve the demon. Both, however, didn't survive Emrakul's appearance on Innistrad. Jaren was killed, and Ormondal fell under the influence of Emrakul. Now, some of the priests and members of this church we're going to be talking about is Skirtstag High Priest. It's a 1 generic, 1 black human cleric. As the morbid ability, you tap Skirtstag High Priest and 2 untapped creatures you control. Create a 5/5 black demon creature token with flying. Activate only if a creature died this turn, and it's a 1/2. Then you got Disciple of Griselbrand. It's a 1 generic, 1 black human cleric. You can pay 1 generic, sacrifice a creature. You gain life equal to the sacrifice creature's toughness, and it's a 1/1. So they're doing the human thing, they're doing the demon thing, and they're doing the sacrifice thing. And these actually work together if you have both on the field and a couple creatures out. They can constantly trigger off each other. It's quite unfortunate we can't really play Griselbrand. He is banned. He would be perfect for this deck because he's one of the big honcho, or sorry, he was one of the big honcho demons on Innistrad. But that doesn't mean we can't play a lot of cool ones. Dreadfast Demon's one of my favorite. It's 5 generic, 2 black. It's a demon. It has flying. At the beginning of your end step, sacrifice a non-demon creature. And if you do, create a token that's a copy of Dreadfast Demon. It's a 6/6. So you can keep sacrificing your tokens, making more. Eventually, you're going to have a whole army of these Dreadfast demons, which they're 6/6 flyers, so that's going to be pretty powerful. Then you got Bringer of the Last Gift. It's a 6 generic, 2 black. It's a vampire demon as flying. And whenever it enters the battlefield, if you cast it, each player sacrifices all other creatures they control. Then each player returns all creature cards from their graveyard that weren't put there this way to the battlefield. And it's a 6/6. So it's essentially a demon with living death on it, which is perfect because we're going to be sacrificing a lot of creatures. This is definitely going to be a demon we want to draw late game. One thing I think Magic does pretty well is represents what demons do in function. They essentially give power and knowledge for a price. And you're probably thinking, why would you want to do that? Well, on Innistrad, it is the worst place for humans to live. So they're getting attacked every full moon or every night by werewolves. Their vampires are eating them. The dead rise from the grave and swarm them. Their dead relatives' spirits haunt them. It's an insane place to live, and angels often falter, especially recently when they all started to attack humanity because of Emrakul's influence. Demons might be your only outlet to fight back, which is unfortunate, but they represent that pretty well in these two cards. These are actually from Duskmoor, but I'm sure the same thing happens on Innistrad. Demonic Covenant, which is a 4 generic 2 black kindred enchantment demon. Whenever one or more demons you control attack a player, you draw a card and lose 1 life. Then at the beginning of your end step, create a 5/5 black demon creature token with flying, then mill 2 cards. If 2 cards that share a card type were milled this way, sacrifice Demonic Covenant. And then Demonic Council, which is like a play on Demonic Tutor. It's a 1 generic, 1 black sorcery. Search your library for a demon card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. It has a Delirium ability that says if there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, instead search your library for any card, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. So this deck is essentially an evil church deck where humans are making deals with demons. You're going to put priests in there. There's a lot of priests, archpriests, disciples, any references you can to some kind of religion. And then put 13 demons. Maybe you want to put like Triskaidekaphobia in here. Maybe you want to put Tria Predation in here. So many good options for this deck. Now, this next one is going to be a doozy. Now, hold on. Let me explain. This is a Tergrid deck, which normally is a no-no. I don't like playing against Tergrid decks. However, this is a Tergrid deck that's a group hug deck. It has nothing, no cards. Don't put any cards that have discard or sacrifice creatures. So that way, you're group hugging, so you're trying to get your opponents to draw so many cards that they discard at the end of the turn, which will make it so you get those cards. That is the goal of this deck. It's not a discard deck, not a make your opponent sacrifice deck. So, okay, now that we got that out of the way, guys, settle down, put the pitchforks down, okay? So, Tergrid, God of Fright, it's a 3 generic, 2 black, legendary creature god, has menace. Whenever an opponent sacrifices a non token permanent or discards a permanent card, you may put that card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. And it's a 4/5. Now, it does have a transform side. It's Turgrid's Lantern. It's a 3 generic, 1 black, legendary artifact. You tap it. Target player loses 3 life unless they sacrifice a non-land permanent or discard a card. Then you can pay 3 generic and a black to untap Turgrid's Lantern. So, like I said, we're focusing on that front side there to make your opponents, once they discard, you get it. Quick lore tidbit: Tergrid was a god on Kaldheim, and she is the god of fright. Her shadow has a life of its own that appears as a towering, hooded figure that never speaks. It will try putting its hand around Tergrid's neck all the time, trying to strangle her. She does her best to just ignore it and will yell at anyone who brings it up. When she was a baby, she cried in an unknown language that caused temporary madness. She will blurt out omens and threats that cut conversations short and make everyone terrified. She sounds like the most interesting party guest you could ever have. I kind of like her story, and she obviously causes fear if you're playing against her in Commander, but our deck isn't going to be like a competitive version of her deck. Now, you've heard of Howling Mine effects. A Mythos is an example of a Howling Mine effect. It's 4 generic artifact. At the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws 2 additional cards. And then you got Damnable Pact. It's X generic, 2 black sorcery. Target player draws X cards and loses X life. So these just force your opponents to draw. Hopefully, you'll be playing a lot of these, and then they'll discard the hand size, and Target will get you those cards. Now, if you want to get a little mean without adding discard spells, you can do stuff that reduces hand size, like Cursed Rack. It's a 4 generic artifact. When it comes into play, choose an opponent, and the chosen player's maximum hand size is 4. So you're making them draw a bunch of cards, which, if their hand size is reduced, they'll have to discard at the end of turn. Then you got Nat Miser. It's a 1 black rat shaman. Your opponent's maximum hand size is reduced by 1, and it's a 1/1. So it's doing the thing. There's a couple cards that do that. That way, you're not actually playing discard spells, but you're using the rules to your advantage because at the end of the turn, they have to discard to maximum hand size. Now, this next deck is definitely the most brutal, but definitely the most unique deck on this list. It revolves around Xenos Galvis. It's a 3 generic, 2 black human noble warrior. Whenever Xenos Galvis enters, choose a creature an opponent controls. Until end of turn, creatures other than Xenos and the chosen creature get -2/-2. Then, when that creature does leave the battlefield, you transform Xenos. It's a 4/4. He transforms into a pretty cool dragon with flying. And then, as this creature transforms, choose an opponent. When the chosen player loses the game, you win the game. And it's an 8/8. So, the goal of this deck actually is focused on that second part and taking control of your opponent's turn. And I'll show you how that all works here in a second. A new card that's coming out in the next set is the Dominion Bracelet. It's a 2 generic legendary artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has pay 15 generic. Exile the Dominion Bracelet. You control target opponent during their next turn. This ability costs X less to activate, where X is that creature's power. Activate only as a sorcery. It's equipped 1. So basically, you gain control of your opponent's turn, and that's the whole theme of the stack. There's about, I would say, 7 ways to do that. Sometimes you only take control of your opponent during specific things, like opposition agent takes control when they're searching, for example. But Emrakul the Promised End is actually a deck I used to have. It's a 13 generic legendary creature Eldrazi. This costs 1 less to cast for each card among cards in your graveyard. It says whenever you cast this spell, you gain control of target opponent during that player's next turn. After that turn, there is an additional turn for that player. That has flying, trample, and protection from instants. So basically, if you have the Dominion bracelet equipped to Emrakul, for example, you can actually control all your opponent's next turns multiple times. It's a very brutal effect. It only costs you 2 mana. And there's also ways in this deck where you can bounce back Emrakul to your hand to recast it to keep gaining control, and then use stuff like Ugin's Nexus to prevent them from taking that extra turn. So you just straight up control the turn. Like I said, it's pretty brutal. Your opponents are going to hate it. And they're especially not going to like it if you play Lethal Vapors or Volrath's Dungeon. So, Lethal Vapors is a 2 generic, 2 black enchantment. Whenever a creature comes into play, you destroy it. And then you pay 0, destroy Lethal Vapors. You skip your next turn. Any player may play this ability. So, of course, if you're controlling your opponent's turn, you can make them activate this ability 1,000 times. Hold priority and keep activating it before it resolves and skip the next 1,000 turns. Like I said, very brutal thing to do. Now, you're going to do this on the opponent you chose, that when they lose, you win the whole game. Because they're most likely going to either die really quick or they're going to scoop. That way, you automatically win. Another thing you can do is Volrath's Dungeon. Now, it's a 2 generic, 2 black, and it's an enchantment, just like Lethal Vapors. But it says any player may pay 5 life during his or her turn to destroy Volrath's Dungeon. And then you choose and discard a card. Target player chooses a card in his or her hand and puts that card on top of his or her library. And then you play this only as a sorcery. So you can, of course, discard a card to mess with your opponent's hand, but that's not what we're doing here. We want that first ability. We want to gain control of our opponent's turn and then make them pay 5 life multiple times until they have almost no life. And then we swing in with our commander, That way they lose the game, and then that way we win the game automatically. This next one I actually do have in paper. It's based around Liliana. It's a mono black Super Friends deck. Now, Liliana has a lot of cards and a lot of card references. If you aren't aware, you can actually go to scryfall.com and you can go to advanced search. You can, of course, search names, like you can search Liliana and there will be a bunch of cards that come up. But if you scroll down, you can see flavor, you can see lore, you can see art. So and you can type in Liliana. So any lore references of her in the game, in the cards, and you'll see there's like over 120 different cards. So it is a really good strategy to use if you have a favorite character. Go to that and then put them all in and then make a deck around those characters. The commander of this deck is actually Yawgmoth Thran Physician. It's a 2 generic, 2 black, legendary creature, human cleric. As protection from humans, you can pay 1 life, sacrifice another creature, put up -1/-1 counter on up to 1 target creature, and draw a card. But the most important ability is you pay 2 black, discard a card to proliferate, and it's a 2/4. So the goal of this deck is obviously to try to ultimate as many Lilianas as we can. Hopefully, one will do the trick, but sometimes you got to do 2, 3, or 4 ultimates. Liliana Dreadhorde General is probably one of my favorites. I've got like 1,000 different arts for her, including the anime one, so I'm pretty pumped about that. And there's a lot of references, like I said. You would be surprised how many. And of course, we can't play a Liliana based deck without the Chain Veil. Now, the Chain Veil is a 4 generic legendary artifact. At the beginning of your end step, if you didn't activate a loyalty ability of a planeswalker this turn, you lose 2 life. Then you can pay 4 generic, tap it. For each planeswalker you control, you may activate one of its loyalty abilities once this turn, as though none of the loyalty abilities have been activated this turn. Obviously, this lets us play Liliana activated abilities multiple times a turn. Perfect. Then you got the Elder spell. This is like Black's version of Doubling Season almost, if you have a lot of Planeswalkers out. It's 2 black sorcery. Destroy any number of target planeswalkers. Choose a planeswalker you control. Put 2 loyalty counters on it for each planeswalker destroyed this way. So if you have 4 planeswalkers, you sacrifice 3 of them to give one of the surviving ones 6 loyalty, which will ultimate probably. So it's just like kind of a one-shot kind of deal. And the Elder spell, if you don't know, is the spell Nicol Bolas used to essentially steal all the sparks during War of the Spark, which Liliana helped him with. She was unwilling, but she still helped him with it. And since we do have Yawgmoth, we're going to be using cards that produce tokens pretty regularly, usually once each turn at least. So you got Ophiomancer and Bitter Blossom. Ophiomancer is a 2 generic, 1 black human shaman. At the beginning of each upkeep, if you control no snakes, create a 1/1 black snake creature token with Death Touch, and it's a 2/2. Then you got Bitter Blossom. It's a 1 generic, 1 black. It's a tribal enchantment fairy. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life and you create a 1/1 black fairy rogue creature token with fly. So they'll make tokens, we'll sacrifice them to draw cards to get more Lilianas, to play more Lilianas, because that's the goal of this deck. You play Lilianas and try to ultimate them to win the game. Now, this deck is actually really funny. I like the idea. So it's Erebos, God of the Dead. If you don't know, he is from Theros. He's essentially their version of Hades. In their world, there's no heaven. There's just the underworld, which he rules. So everyone kind of just goes to him. So he's basically inevitable, like Thanos. This whole deck is trying to make it so every card you play has some reference to dead, or dying or death, or it destroys a creature or recurs a creature from the dead. So you want to try to do every single card referencing that, or maybe the art pictures someone dying. You can get kind of creative with it if you want. So he is a 3 generic, 1 black legendary enchantment creature god with indestructible. As long as your devotion to black is less than 5, he isn't a creature. Your opponent can't gain life, and you can pay 2 and then pay 2 life, draw a card, and it's a 5/7. So you want to obviously have him on the field. You could play around with the not gaining life thing, but him being a 5/7 indestructible is pretty good. The draw power is also pretty decent. Now you want that devotion to be high, so you want to play permanents like planeswalkers, creatures, enchantments. So stuff like you can actually make this like an enchantress deck if you wanted. Stuff like Dawn of the Dead is a great card because it fits our dead strategy. It recurs things back from the dead. So it's two generic, three black enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose one life. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you may return target creature card from your graveyard to play. That creature gains haste until end of turn and remove it from the game at the end of the turn. So it can recur things and it references the dead and it gives us 3 pips for our devotion, which is perfect. And if you do go with the Enchantress theme, and this also goes with the Death theme because it's in the flavor text and it kills creatures. Doomwake Giant, he's a 4 generic, 1 black enchantment creature giant. When he or another enchantment you control enters, creatures your opponents control get -1/-1 until end of turn, and it's a 4/6. So he is going to just sweep tokens like crazy. Then something like Black Market, which doesn't have death in the title or flavor text, but it has a triggered ability when something dies. So it's a 3 generic, 2 black enchantment. Whenever a creature dies, put a charge counter on Black Market. And at the beginning of your pre combat main phase, add a black for each charge counter on Black Market. You can get kind of silly with it. What is the magic way of bringing things back from the dead? The art of it. It's called necromancy. You can play necromancy, which brings something back from the dead. You got Death Pits of Wraith. It's a 3 generic, 2 black enchantment. Whenever a creature is dealt damage, destroy it. It can't be regenerated. So this is essentially what I call super Death Touch because it's Death Touch, but they can't be regenerated. And that's the theme of the deck. It's very flavorful. You're going to have a lot of removal in this deck, I assume. So, and a lot of recursion. So, it's going to be definitely a powerful deck with flavor. Now, this next deck focuses on taking your opponent's cards from the bottom of their library. When I think of theft decks, I usually think of blue or red. So, this will actually give an opportunity to play some fun theft cards you might not otherwise play or even be on your radar. Now, this deck is around the Mind Flayer, the Shadow, which is a card from Secret Lair, the Stranger Things series, of course, but it does have a kind of magic in world themed card too. Now, I like the style and flavor of the Mind Flayer, the Shadow, because the card was actually printed upside down. So if you turn this card around, the backside would be facing straight up like normal. But if you turn it around, the front side is actually upside down, which represents him coming from the upside down, which is pretty good. Now, the ability is 4 generic, 3 black, legendary enchantment creature horror. It isn't a creature unless you control 3 or more permanents you don't own. And at the beginning of your end step, exile the bottom card of each opponent's library face down. For as long as those cards remain exiled, you may look at them and you may cast permanent spells from among them, and you may spend mana as though it were any color to cast those spells, and it's a 9/9. So it can only steal your opponent's permanents from the bottom of the library, but we're going to be stacking your opponent's library from the bottom, and you'll see how in a second. Now, we don't know much about Arvinox. We know that they are from Innistrad, but that's about it. But the Mind Flayer is a malevolent, hive minded entity from the Upside Down in Stranger Things. It's a powerful ancient being that seeks to conquer the human world and merge it with the Upside Down. It controls the Upside Down's ecosystem, including creatures like Demogorgons and the Flayed. It can also possess humans, using them as vessels to carry out its plans. It kind of reminds me of Yawgmoth and kind of the hive mind that Phyrexians have, and where they like try to absorb and conquer worlds. Now, like I said, we're going to be playing a lot of cool theft cards we might not normally play. Cunning Rhetoric is one of my favorites. It's 2 generic, 1 black enchantment. Whenever an opponent attacks you and or a planeswalker you control, exile the top card of that player's library. You may play that card for as long as it remains exiled, and you may spend mana as though it were any mana of any color. Then Dead Man's Chest, I've actually never seen this in a commander game. It's a really cool card. It's a one generic, one black. It's an aura. Enchant creature an opponent controls. When enchanted creature dies, exile cards equal to its power from the top of its owner's library. You may cast spells from among those cards for as long as they remain exiled, and you may spend mana as though it were any type to cast those spells. Now, Cunning Rhetoric uh, I think it's kind of better than Ghostly Prison in some ways, but it's almost like a Ghostly Prison effect. People hate their stuff getting taken from them, so Cunning Rhetoric will prevent people from attacking you. And then Dead Man's Chest essentially will, if you're going to get rid of something anyway, you might as well throw this on it and then profit from it. Now, this deck will be stacking your opponent's decks from the bottom of their library because they're going to be stealing cards from the bottom of their library. How are we going to do that? Step one, we're going to mill. So, Mesmeric Orb, which is a 2 generic artifact, whenever a permanent becomes untapped, that permanent's controller mills a card. So, we're going to try to fill their graveyard, which black doesn't do very well. It's definitely off color. We will typically mill ourselves, but we also got stuff that will take cards from a graveyard and put them on the owner's library. Junk Troller is an example. It's 4 generic. It's an artifact creature golem as defender, and you can tap it to put target card from a graveyard on the bottom of its owner's library. And it's a 0/6. So if we're milling someone and they have good cards that we want, because we can only really steal permanents, we can put those on the bottom and then use our commander to steal them. Now, you probably thinking there's only a couple cards that do what Junk Trawler does. There are over a dozen cards that do it. There's actually a lot more cards than I expected. I don't know why they keep printing this archetype. I know they're doing it specifically to do graveyard hate strategies, but come on, do we need 1,000 of these? But that's essentially this deck. You steal the bottom of the library, we're going to mill, and then pick and choose what we want to put on their library, and then we go ahead and take it. Now, if the Xenos deck was the most brutal deck on this list, I would say this Ayara First of Lochthwain is the most powerful deck on this list. Now, this deck I actually had in paper, but it was so effective, I thought maybe I will tear it down and kind of rebuild it. So she is a 3 black legendary creature, Elf Noble. Whenever she or another black creature enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses a life and you gain a life. Then you can tap her, sacrifice another black creature, draw a card, and it's a 2/3. Now, the whole theme of this deck is an ETB deck. And obviously, flickering and blinking isn't something you can do well in black. However, you can use feign death effects. So it makes it kind of like an aristocrat, ETB deck. That's what I call them anyway. It's a 1 black instant. Until end of turn, target creature gains. When this creature dies, return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control with a +1/+1 counter on it. So there are, I think, like 14 or 15 cards that do exactly that in mono black. So what you do is you use Ayara's ability, sacrifice one of your ETB creatures, but first do feign death. So when it dies to the sacrifice ability, it comes back. Now, a quick lore tidbit. The people of Lochthwain called Ayara the Widowed Queen. She'd declare a champion of her realm, marry him, and send him to find the Cauldron of Eternities. If they didn't return the cauldron in a year and a day, she'd have a funeral for them, assuming they were dead, and then have another wedding, doing it again. She was completed by the Phyrexians and killed by Rankle the Fairy, who used a love potion to trick her, which is kind of the craziest fairy tale I've ever heard. Now, what kind of creatures are we going to be ETBing? This deck heavily focused on removal creatures. For example, Necron Deathmark is a 3 generic, 2 black artifact creature Necron as flash, and when it enters the battlefield, destroy up to 1 target creature and target player mills 3 cards. And it's a 5/3. So it's a targeted removal. And then you got your sacrifice abilities. There's a bunch of them in mono black. You got Fleshbag Marauder. He's a 2 generic, 1 black zombie warrior. When he enters the battlefield, each player sacrifices a creature, and it's a 3/1. And just keep in mind, as you're sacrificing this with your commander's ability and they're coming back, you're draining and gaining, you're doing the ETB trigger, you're drawing a card. So it's amazing value. A few more ETB abilities I want to highlight. Ghastly Death Tyrant's a 4 generic, 2 black Beholder Skeleton. When it enters the battlefield, you choose one. You can destroy target enchantment an opponent controls. You lose life equal to its mana value. Or creatures you control gain Death Touch until end of turn, and it's a 6/5. I was playing this deck against an Enchantress deck, and Ghastly Death Tyrant did some work. I think it ended up destroying like 4 or 5 enchantments. Now, you're going to be gaining life as you sacrifice, so it kind of minimizes that drain life for the enchantment removal. That's such a good card. Now you also got Disciple of Bolus. It's a 3 generic, 1 black human wizard. When it enters the battlefield, sacrifice another creature. You gain X life and draw X cards, where X is that creature's power, and it's a 2/1. This card I play in almost every black deck because worst case scenario, it's a draw 2, gain 2 life because you can sacrifice Disciple of Bolus to herself. And of course, when you're doing this multiple times, drawing more cards, drawing more Feign Death abilities, it just keeps going together. It's such good synergy. And that's essentially the deck. Use your commander, sacrifice creatures, bring them back at instant speed with Feign Death effects, and bing bada boom, you're going to have so much value. This next deck is actually one I have had in paper. I added white to it, so it's no longer around this. But the idea of this deck, and I don't know if you know this, but in black, in lore, essentially, you trade knowledge for your life. So usually, draw spells in black have the cost of your life. No one does this better than Villas, Broker of Blood. He's a 5 generic, 3 black. He's a legendary creature demon. He has flying. You can pay a black, pay 2 life. Target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn. Whenever you lose life, you draw that many cards, and it's an 8/8, which I love this card just because of the flavor. You're making literal deals with demons in order to get power and knowledge. Now, Villas is an 8 mana commander, so you're going to have to run a lot of good protection for it. So, what was my goal of this deck? Just to draw a lot of cards for value? Yes. However, one thing I really wanted to do with this deck is a epic spell called Never Ending Torment. It's a 4 generic, 2 black sorcery. Search target player's library for X cards, where X is the number of cards in your hand, or remove them from the game. Then that player shuffles his or her library. So the whole theme of this deck is to get your hand size so large you get rid of a majority of an opponent's deck. And of course, we're going to have ways to copy this. So you're getting rid of a lot of cards and going into someone's deck and removing all their good cards, leaving them like nothing but lands, is a very effective way to win a game. Now, Never Ending Torment has a very interesting ability with the Epic. Now, Epic means you can't cast anything else during the game, which is a huge drawback. However, it copies itself at the beginning of your upkeep. So things like Twinning Staff and Strionic Resonator can really help. Twinning Staff is a 3 generic artifact. It says if you would copy a spell one or more times, instead copy it that many times plus an additional time. You may choose new targets for the additional copy. Then you can pay 7, tap it, copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. You may choose new targets for the copy. So this can copy your epic spell at least 3 times because you're not going to be casting anything. And by the way, you could build more around that with like channel abilities, cycle abilities if you want. But you'll be copying like crazy. Shronic Resonator is a 2 generic artifact. You pay 2, tap it, copy target triggered ability. You may choose new targets for the copy. Now, epic spells are triggered abilities, so you can easily copy it with that. This deck is unique in a few ways. One, it's a monocolored black elf deck, so it's an off-color themed tribal deck. It's also a monocolored partner deck, which you don't really see often, but they're also both uncommons. So if you wanted to play a pauper kind of EDH deck, you can. Now, Myara, Thorn of the Glade, is the first commander. It's a 1 generic, 1 black legendary creature, elf scout. When she or another elf you control dies, you may pay one generic and one life. And if you do, draw a card. As partner, it's a 1/2. And then you got Nadir, Agent of Duskanel. It's a 5 generic, 1 black, legendary creature, elf warrior. When a token you control leaves the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on Nadir. When Nadir leaves the battlefield, create a number of 1/1 green elf warrior creature tokens equal to its power. And it's a 3/3. Now, as you can kind of see, this could be an aristocrat style theme, which black does pretty well. Elves tend to swarm, but a board wipe can kind of just get rid of them and they have to rebuild. With Myara, you can draw a lot of cards. You do have to pay some mana and some life to do so, which is typical black flavoring. However, it can refuel your hand. You can produce another army and keep going. Now, Deer will make tokens, and to note, my R's ability doesn't say non-token elf; it just says another elf. Now, Nadir doesn't technically have much lore around him. We don't even know what plane he's from, but Myara is an elf from Lorwyn. Now, Lorwyn elves are quite problematic to say the least. Beauty matters above all else to them. They have a caste system that's built around beauty. The most beautiful are in the perfect caste. The caste down from them are the exquisites, which is where Myara is from. She is known to be an amazing hunter of goblins, which is what they call eye blights, which is kind of rude. They're like, goblins are ugly. We need to kill them. They're called eye blights. It's just so rude. And then, if you have more beauty in their eyes, you can kill anyone uglier than you with impunity. So, a perfect elf can kill a exquisite elf, for example. It's kind of a weird system, and I definitely don't like it. Now, a few mono black elf tribal cards here. You got Skimfar Avenger. It's a 1 generic, 1 black elf berserker. When another non token elf or berserker you control dies, you draw the card and lose a life, and it's a 3/1. So it's similar to your commander where we care about things dying and we can draw from that. Then Elvish Dreadlord, which is a cool name. It's 3 generic, 2 black, zombie elf. It has Death Touch, and when it dies, non elf creatures get neg 3 until end of turn, and then it has Encore for 7. It's a 3/3. So this thing we will want to die a lot. That way we keep training the board. If you do the Encore ability, you have to sacrifice all 3 copies, which will give all non elves -9, which is great for us. So remember, Nadir triggers when he dies equal to his power. So you can put a lot of things that boost him and then sacrifice him to get a bunch of elves on the field. Necrosynthesis is a card that actually does what his ability already kind of does. It's a 1 generic, 1 black aura. Enchant creature. Enchanted creature has whenever another creature dies, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. Then when an enchanted creature dies, look at the top X cards of your library where X is its power. Put one of those into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So it makes them bigger and then it can replace itself, which is amazing. Then Prowess of the Fair is a 1 generic, 1 black tribal enchantment elf. Whenever another non token elf is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, you may create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token. I like how this is referencing their beauty standards, and it's also making tokens we can sacrifice to draw cards with our other commander. So that's essentially the deck. Try to make an aristocrat style mono black elf deck. Put as many cards that say when something dies, draw a card because you'll be drawing like crazy. Boost up Nadir if you can. That way you get a lot of elves. Now, this last deck is all about creating mini games in Magic. Now, if you've never played like a dungeon deck or a monarch deck or something where things are getting passed around and things, there's a kind of a mini game going on, you don't know what you're missing. It just makes the game more fun. And you can do that in mono black pretty easily. You got Starscreen Power Hungry. It's a 3 generic, 1 black legendary artifact creature robot. It has more than meets the eye. for 2 and a black as flying, and whenever you draw a card, if you're the monarch, target opponent loses 2 life. Whenever one or more creatures deal combat damage to you, convert this creature, and it's a 2/3. And then it converts to Starscream Seeker Leader, which is a legendary artifact vehicle as living metal, flying, menace, and haste. And whenever it deals damage to a player, if there is no monarch, that player becomes the monarch. And then it says whenever you become the monarch, convert is also a 2/3. So basically, this can give things monarch from the command zone. Monarch, if you don't already know, someone becomes the monarch, they can basically draw an extra card at their end step. But if someone does damage to them, the monarch passes to the person that is dealt damage. What is a monarchy without a corrupt court? Now, Court of Ambition and Court of Lochthorn are two cards that give you the monarchy. So, Court of Ambition is 2 generic, 2 black enchantment. When it ETBs, you become the monarch. And at the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent loses 3 life unless they discard a card. If you're the monarch, instead, each opponent loses 6 life unless they discard 2 cards. And then Court of Lochthorn is a 2 generic, 2 black enchantment. Whenever it enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of target opponent's library. You may play that card as long as it remains exiled, and mana of any type can be used to cast it. If you're the monarch, until end of turn, you may cast a spell from among cards exiled with Court of Lochthorn without paying their mana cost. So it steals your opponent's stuff, which is definitely in the court theme, and it also gives monarch. So if you can't do damage to your opponent, they're too well protected. You can play one of these and steal the monarch from them. You want to play cards that also give you the initiative. Now, the initiative lets you venture into a particular dungeon, and then when your opponent deals combat damage to you, they venture into that and they gain control of it. And then you do damage to them, then you get it back, and that's how you can venture into this particular dungeon. So you can get that with a variety of ways. From the Catacombs is one of my favorite. It's a 3 generic, 2 black sorcery. Put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control with a corpse counter on it. You take the initiative. If that creature would leave the battlefield, exile it instead of putting it anywhere else. And then it has escape for 3 generic and 2 black. Exile 5 other cards from your graveyard. So it's a recursion spell. Also gives you the initiative. That's great. Now, another mini game you can do is just venturing into a regular dungeon. Your opponent can't steal that, obviously. However, it's still a fun mini game you can play. A Serac the Archlich is a card that you can use. It's 2 generic, 1 black, legendary creature, zombie wizard. Whenever he enters the battlefield, if you haven't completed Tomb of Annihilation, return him to its owner's hand and venture into the dungeon. And then whenever he attacks for each opponent, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token unless that player sacrifices a creature. It needs a 5/5. This would also make a pretty cool venture into the dungeon commander. Now, you can obviously choose Tomb of Annihilation as your dungeon. I think there's 4 that you can voluntarily go into in Magic. And that's essentially the deck. You make mini games within games and you just have fun with it. Your opponents will love and they'll actually play around, who they attack depending on who's monarch, who has the initiative because they want those perks. And those are 10 deck ideas that you can take to spice up your commander nights. I love making decks like this. This is the second in my series. I also did mono red decks. If you want to go check that out, that was pretty fun. I think mono red is one of my favorite colors to build in because it has so many drawbacks. You have to get pretty creative with your stuff. And if you like videos like this, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and comment down below if you have any of these decks. And if you do, how do they work out for you? Some of these I have played, some of them I haven't. And if you want me to expand more on some of these and give some deck lists, I can totally do that in a full-length video or maybe a short. Just comment down below if you're interested in that. Until next time, I'll see you guys.